Good afternoon, folks. I hope you're hungry for some juicy stories. Enjoy. Disclaimer, this happened a long time ago, but still makes me giggle to this day. So way back in the day, mid-90s or so, my family lived in a log cabin on 10 acres of land in a rural area 10 minutes or so out of town. It wasn't totally the sticks, but you could definitely hear banjo music in the background sometimes. At the end of our nearly 1/4 mile long driveway was one of those roads that was also technically a state highway. In the AM I'd trudge down to wait for the bus. When I got home I'd grab the mail and carry it back. Until one Monday morning when I went out and noticed the mailbox was gone. On closer inspection looked like it had just been ripped out of the ground. Dad was obviously not pleased. He went to talk with the county sheriff who happened to live a mile down the road. Turns out it had been happening up and down the road for months. Someone was tossing a chain over mailboxes and yanking them out with their vehicle. He suspected a guy down the road with his great big lifted 4WD truck, but couldn't prove anything. Usually happened on Saturday and Sunday nights with people finding out in the morning. Also seems the nicer the mailbox the bigger a target, and many had been hit multiple times. People had tried digging deeper, using more durable wood, etc. The guy just took it as a challenge and ripped them out again. Soft, sandy ground and his truck was a monster. Well, Dad said challenge fricking accepted. A bit about my father. He's a steel worker with an engineering background and graduate degree. Built like a bear with forearms the size of my fricking legs. Most people looking at him would never think this monster of a man is also brilliant, but he is. The calm, cool type that almost never loses his temper. But wrong him and God help you. So Dad goes to Lowe's and buys the fanciest, prettiest mailbox they sell. He then proceeds to install it on top of an 8 feet long cylinder of 3 inches diameter hardened tool steel. But he wasn't done there. After digging down with post holers and dropping it in, he then filled it in with quickset concrete. To really sell it he then used some strips of 1/2 inch wood to cover the steel core of his now indestructible mailbox of doom. Primed and painted them so it looked like a standard 4 inches post. And even had my mom decorated it with flowers and such. He wanted it to be as tempting of a target as possible. Didn't even take a week. I went out for school in the morning and found the mailbox right where it should be. Attached to it was 30 feet of chain and an entire hitch assembly. Ripped right off the truck's frame, sheared the bolts. It was marvelous to behold. Sheriff gets called over, dies laughing when he sees it. He went to the house of the guy that was suspected and sure enough verified the damage to his truck matched. Fun fact, ducking with a mailbox is a federal crime. As in you go to federal prison, not those cushy state places. Dad was unofficially rewarded by the sheriff's department with a few cases of beer and some venison. And after that every deputy in town would flash him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. When my grandpa was growing up he didn't have electricity, this being rural Kansas. What they did have was a wood-burning stove. At one point firewood that great-grandfather had been storing began to disappear, a thief was afoot. My great-grandfather, getting tired of the firewood disappearing, hatches a plan. Great-grandfather takes some of the logs and drills them out leaving a cavity. He then puts some gunpowder in the cavities and plugs the holes to hide his handiwork. That night he tells my grandpa that he would bring in the firewood. Of course he knows what logs he's messed with. Now this is the funny part and I wish I knew how embellished it was, but stranger things have happened. The next day great-grandfather is walking into town and comes across a gentleman also headed into town, and they get to talking. It turns out the gentleman is going into town to make a purchase, the item he seeks, a new stove. He says to my great-grandfather, "I don't know what they're putting in the coal these days, but it destroyed my stove. No wood ever went missing again." I'm a 31 male and currently serve in the British Army. I come from a very poor and broken family. My brother is 30, who also serves in the army, but a different corp to myself. He lives directly opposite my father's house and live around 250 miles away. I wasn't raised by my parents and brought up by my grandparents, who were both retired and living off their state pension. So money was hard but they did what they could and I'm thankful. I worked on a local farm since I was 12 to get what other kids had and often enough, money for food. My brother Martin, was raised by my father and stepmom who provided for him well. I have several other siblings who my mom raised. There's 8 of us in total. I know, get a hobby, watch the TV or go outside. I only talk to one of my siblings, which is my half-sister Sarah. Martin is everything I hate in a person. Cocky, big-headed, gloats and the world evolves around him. All my mail goes to my father's house. This is normal for people who serve. Over the 10 years I had managed to save just under £35,000. Which is a huge amount to me. I have lived the simple life saving where I can and volunteered to deploy on operations, which we get a bonus for doing. I have officially spent over 4.5 years not sleeping in my own bed to achieve this and my dream of owning my own home, which is something unheard of in my family. Upon returning from my last operational tour, the time came to start looking for a home. I set my budget, got an APE, agreement in principle, and found an area I liked. When the time came to start moving my money to a separate account, to my shock and horror I discovered my account had less than £50 in it. I felt sick, horrified and crushed. I called my bank hoping it was just a mistake. It wasn't. There had been a number of withdrawals and transfers made over the last 6 months that had cleared the balance. The only information they could give me was a statement showing the account it left and the account number that it was transferred when to. I spoke to my stepmom who has the info of my account to find out if she had moved it. As she went through the account she had noticed the account number was my brother's. My blood is boiling now. I called him and let loose down the phone, and after a swift exchange of insults, he admitted to taking it. For those wondering what his excuse was, and I crap you not, you don't need the money, you don't have a family, probably would never have one either, and it's selfish having all that money and not sharing it. There was other things said to which I do not wish to share, and to put this into context for people, I'm gay and he's was saying I will not have kids therefore did not need money or my own home. He earns above national average. Lives comfortably, shoves in people's faces. For example, when it comes around to Christmas, him and his wife like to post on social media how much they've bought. They literally lay it out all over their living and dining room floors, stacked high, and there is no room to walk as a means to gloat to people who do not have the means buy as much as them. Here comes the revenge. I'm back into no contact with him. However, I am fully aware of a few things. Martin's wife claims he lives with me's mother, so she can claim state benefits for her and his 3 kids. I took leave from work for 3 weeks and go visit my father and stepmom. I record my brother stopping at his house every single day and wrote a log of when he left and returned. My stepmother also informed me he isn't working much because he has told his sergeant major his wife and one of his kids are seriously ill and he needs to be home to care for them. To clarify, they are not. They are in good health. In the British Army you get paid full, whether you're off work, ill, family issues, etc., a perk of the job. I sent this information to the Department of Work and Pensions and they launched their own investigation. Asides from being a benefit thief, I then call his sergeant major, after a discussion and a few emails of a link social media, which is covered in videos of Martin and his wife always drinking, partying and a lot of geotagging. He is called back to work immediately. From what he has told my dad, he was given a 2-year promotion ban, and £1,800 fine. I do not know how long he had been doing this for. He was also moved camp very quickly after this. His wife has also been ordered to repay a year's worth of benefits back to the taxpayer. Big win for the little people. Lastly, he also wrote off his shiny new car, which is probably where all my money went. As for what he's stolen from me, I've spoken to a legal expert in fraud who seems willing to take my case, and I want to fully press charges and reclaim what I can. My father, on the other hand, has told me not to take this route and proclaims if I do it, it will undoubtedly affect his kids and his ability to get work if he ever left the military due to gaining a criminal record. He has suggested we talk of a repayment plan as he's been punished enough. Which I know it will never be repaid. I'm at odds with the guilty feeling. In order to take it to court I'd have to lodge a formal complaint. However, I am bitter. It's crappy. I've grafted over all years these to improve my situation in life just to have it pulled from me. I'm thankful I've still got my health, but life's not been easy and I feel like just giving up. You know who you are. One of you is at every goddamn show. I used to tour with a band, and we had around 200 concerts a year. At least 200 times a year, someone would yell "Free Bird" and laugh like they said something clever. I don't understand why it's funny, and hearing it every day for thousands of shows. Yup, still not at all funny. So, one day we tried to find out the deal. When the Freebird guy of the day yelled, we invited him on stage to answer a few questions. Why do you yell "Freebird"? Because it's funny. Why is that funny? Look of confusion and shame. Okay, so we didn't get any answers, but we certainly came up with one. Nobody comes up with ridiculous ideas like a group of 20-somethings who spend 15 hours a day in a van together. First thing we had to do was buy a sampler. This is a small piece of equipment that you can pre-program with any sounds you want and press buttons to trigger them. They are pretty expensive. The one we bought for the prank was $1,200. Side note, we were staying all 5 members to a single hotel room every night and eating nothing but dollar menu garbage and ramen because even if your band is doing good, you're still broke. I just want you to understand how ridiculous it was for us to spend $1,000 on this. As far as I'm concerned, it was worth it 10 times over. The next thing we needed was a folding table with chairs for all of us, some teacups and a newspaper or 2. We would set these up next to the stage and no one would even notice it was there. So we found a 16-minute long version of Free Bird and loaded it onto the sampler. The trap was set. Sure enough, someone yelled Free Bird. At the next show. This time, our lead singer acted really interested. "What's that you say? Free Bird? Do you want to hear Free Bird?" The audience cheers loudly. "So, just to be clear, you want us to stop playing our set and instead play Free Bird?" They cheer again in approval, and now the Free Bird guy clearly looks like he's never been so proud of anything he's ever done in his life. We all stepped to the center of the stage in a very serious-looking huddle. We made it a point to go comically long discussing Free Bird, and sometimes we would just talk about movies we liked for a while or make fun of each other's sisters. When we felt like it had gone on long enough, and we were terrible about making jokes go way too long, we all nodded and made it clear that we had just agreed to play Free Bird. "Alright folks. You asked for it. You've got it. Here we go, Free Bird." While the crowd went absolutely nuts, the singer went to the sampler and like an old man fumbling to use a remote, he found the button and pressed it as anticlimactically as possible. Free Bird begins to play, and we all put our instruments down and sit around the table. We sip on pretend tea and browse the newspaper quietly. At first everyone thought it was hilarious, but after a few minutes they started to revolt, chanting for us to come back and all. We would look at each other in a very confused manner, and shrug it off a few times before the singer would finally go back to the mic. "What's going on? You don't want to listen to this anymore? No. You want us to play our stuff again? Yeah. Well, what about that guy who yelled Free Bird? That guy sucks." And then the booing would start for that poor Freebird guy. We did this for an entire tour, and it absolutely never got old. I'd like to think that after that year, tens of thousands of people stopped yelling Free Bird at every show they go to. At least for me, that makes the world a slightly better place. What did you think? What would you have done differently? Share your opinions in the comments. And if you enjoyed the stories, slap that like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.